everyone, Jules Lund here. I'm your host of this content series called Barefaced Chat, and we're lucky to have Zaid Al-Qassab. Zaid is actually a fellow, so a couple of years ago through Europe, part of the Marketing Academy. Here we are at Cannes. This is the Cannes Villa. It's been an extraordinary week, and we've been sharing these great stories with individuals like yourself. You are the global CEO of M&C Saatchi, and it's a fresh job for you.
It is. I've been in the job this is week 6.
Great.
And in that time, I've been to see our colleagues in Sydney, in Singapore, in Dubai, in New York. And from here, I'm going to see them in Milan and Berlin.
Wow.
I've barely touched the ground.
That's extraordinary. So you must be exhausted.
Oh, I'm pretty tired.
Good, because I'm going to exploit that, because I'm going to ask you some tough questions, and your guard's not going to be up, so I want some raw truths. All right.
Let's do it.
Feel free to cry if you want. I did. Sil Salah interviewed me, and I did the ugly cry and a high pitch, which is nice and rare. Okay, so we're going to kick off. I want to understand your role, the scope of it, the size of it, and a little bit of where you came from, just so people can coordinate themselves with you.
Cool. So the new role, very new to me, M&C Saatchi is quite a famous name, but people probably don't know what the group is. They know us for our advertising services. We're actually in 23 countries, and we do all creative services. So we have a media division, we have a sport and entertainment division, we do consulting, advertising, and something we call issues as well. So pretty much every capability. So like a sort of mini group. We're about 2,500 people. Wow. We're here in Cannes for the first time in years, actually, to put ourselves back on the map and tell people about us again.
Amazing. Where did you come from? What was the lead up?
Well, most recently, I was the CMO at Channel 4. That's a UK broadcaster and streamer. Quite well known in Cannes because it's very successful at winning Lions.
Yeah.
So a very creative company, risk-taking company, does really great work through a great team there called Full Creative. And prior to that, I was in more corporate stuff. So I was the CMO of British Telecom. And before that, I was 20 years at Procter & Gamble, sales and marketing jobs, commercial jobs, and general management.
You look too young to have had all those decades, but I'll take it. I'm going to just go for the jugular. You've been in these chats at the Marketing Academy. So what has been your single worst professional day?
Oh, I mean, look, there's no doubt that days when you have to make a lot of people redundant are pretty awful. Right?
Yeah.
And it's a factor of our business, our industry, that it's really cyclical, goes through good times and bad times. And even when it's not cyclical, it can be really lumpy. A big client change or a big business change or a brand being sold can change the whole context of the company. And in our business, that means there are times when, as a leader, you are going to your organization and saying X% of the people here are not going to be here soon. And that is heartbreaking. I try to remind myself that it's not as heartbreaking doing it as it is having it done to you. And luckily, I say luckily, because I've been through redundancy a couple of times in my life, I know how it feels on the other side.
Yeah.
And I try to remember those days and think, how would I have wanted to be treated? There's nothing nice about it. You can't pretend it's good. You can't sugarcoat it.
No.
But what you can do is treat people with respect and honesty through that process. And once I was made redundant in a way that I felt was underhand and intransparent and not nicely handled. And once I was made redundant in a way that I felt was really respectful, and I'm still mates with the manager who did it. And in fact, he called me up quite recently asking for a favour, and I was delighted to, because I just thought he was a decent human being. So I've learned from that even though that is the most awful thing you have to do in our jobs, it still can be done in a respectful way that leaves people thinking that you are a decent human being. Love that.
Can you over-empathise, though? Because I'll give you an example, like, when I created my company, I was I knew the feeling. I was so worried about how they'd feel. I just almost got in the pit with them, and I was always in tears. And, how do you...
Yeah, and when you're a young manager, I think that is the temptation.
Yeah.
First time you make someone redundant, this sounds awful because it implies it's going to happen frequently, but frankly, in our business, it
does.
If you're going to get senior, it does, right? And it's not personal. It's really important. It's the business causing this to happen. It's not
Yeah.
about the individuals. It's almost never that the person isn't good at their job. It's just that we can't afford all those people, right? And when you first do it, when you're a more junior manager, you're like, hey, I'm on your side, mate.
Yeah.
Let's see what we can do. And the truth is, you can't do anything except be a decent human being about it. So you can over-empathise, but you can also under-empathise, right? The time I was saying was really shit. I had a manager who, you know the book, The Hard Thing About Hard Things, right? The famous book
Marcus Aurelius.
about startups and MVPs and how you do it. And there's a chapter in that book that's about, hey, when you're going through a pivot and you don't need those people, you just have to get rid of them.
Yeah.
So I had a manager who didn't have the guts to say, you're about to be made redundant. He said, I've got a book for you. I need you to read this by tomorrow. And then I read the book, and then he went, you know that chapter about how people get made redundant? Yeah, well, yeah. That's just awful.
There's worse ways, but that's
a pretty shitty way.
Yeah. I mean, I look,
Cowardly.
Cowardly. It comes down to that. How have you dealt with all the way up jerks? So they could be on the board, they could be your boss, they could be your peer, they could be in your team.
Yeah, look, if I'm going to talk about jerks, I would first caveat that by saying my whole philosophy on business, right, is we are not machines. We're just a bunch of human beings in business together, right? That organization is a living, breathing organism of humans. And I look at my personal experience of life, which is most people are really decent people.
Yeah.
Right? Most people go home to their families, they love their partner and their kids, they play sport at the weekend with their mates, they enjoy a drink in the evening, and they want to come to work and like the people they're with, right? And I would say that is 99% of people. And it is a great it's a great support to yourself when you remember when you've got a jerk on your hand. That's a very Aussie way of saying it. I would call them an arsehole. When you've got an arsehole on your hands...
No, it's actually an American way. I use
the Aussie word?
A flog.
Oh, okay, a flog. I've never heard that. That's good. Okay, so if you've got a flog or an arsehole or a jerk...
Or a cock.
Right? Then...
I've got a whole list here.
Then I think you have
beeping.
You have to... We're making it hard for the editors. Then you have to remind yourself that actually most people are decent, right?
Yep.
You start off by treating people decently. You let them make a mistake and be an arsehole once or twice. And then when you get the repeated behaviour and you know they're really an arsehole, honestly, my answer is you get them out of your business as fast as you can.
Yep.
So you give them the chance, you give them the feedback, you tell them that's not how people behave around here and that's not going to go down well. And then if they do it again, you just find a way to get rid of them.
It's interesting, though, all of those terms are quite masculine for a reason. Because they're usually men. Are they?
I don't rule out women being assholes.
Yeah, but I do. I think one of the great benefits of gender equality and ensuring that the C-suite in particular is balanced is because I think there's less jerks as females.
Well, people bring different characteristics and people's experiences shape who they are.
Yeah.
I have to say, one of the things I most dislike is women who rise to the top and then are really hard on women because they use this kind of strange logic that because life was shit for me, I'm going to make it really doubly hard for women because then only the best ones will rise. Well, hang on, that's just as bad as the way you were treated, and I don't get that. And you do see that sometimes. So I'm not ruling out that some women who get to the top are also arseholes.
Yeah. What's been a time that your confidence was rock bottom?
I guess after you get made redundant, right? As I said, that happened to me a couple of times. It's a big knock to your confidence.
Because we talk about it as not being personal, but the problem is no matter how you as a leader or a manager deliver the news and it's not personal and because, hey, we can't afford you and there's safety in numbers, everyone's going. How they take it, you do not control. And what we all do is we take it personal.
Right, yeah. Yeah, and the irony is that more often it happens to you, the more you start to believe it's not personal. And yet, but the funny thing is, the data's saying it's always you, so, maybe it is. But it isn't. It really isn't. It's how businesses are run nowadays. I'm not saying it's good. I don't think it is. I really wish we still had the land of the family business that was about employing people in the community, and the pride was in the fact that you employed 20 people in the town, and that is what gave the wealth and the well-being to the town. I wish that existed, but in our capitalist world it doesn't, so we are where we are. But yeah, those are bad times. They knock your confidence, and you get to a point where you think, I don't know if it's me, and I don't know if I'm going to get another job. And those are really difficult times. The interesting thing is, I don't know anyone at the top in this profession who hasn't been made redundant. So that ought to give everyone some confidence that it isn't to do with how good or bad you are. It's just how our business works.
How do you rebuild your confidence?
Well, I mean, it's a damn good question. I think you need friends around you, mentors, peers, basically friends in the industry who are going to do two things. One thing is they're going to take you to the pub and say, this is not about you, right? You're brilliant. I love you. Your team love you. You'll be fantastic. All we've got to do is get you back on the horse and get you another job. You need that personally. And then the second thing you need them to do is to be out there scouting for jobs for you and putting leads your way and telling people you're great. And someone did that to me the first time I was redundant. And ever since then, I have gone out of my way to do that for other people, either people from my company who were going through that process or people who come to me and say, I'm out of a job at the moment, Zaid, can you help? And I'm always saying, do you know what? I can give you as many leads as you want, and I'm happy to. And whether you manage to get those jobs or not, that's up to you. Yeah. But I think good people deserve to be put through doors and given the chance to flourish.
Over the years, what's a dimension of your leadership style that you found difficult to perfect?
Oh,
what do you suck at as a leader?
I am. I have something that I lean on very heavily, right? Which is that I know my own values in life, right? And I lead living those values, right? In many ways, that makes leadership for me, particularly decision-making and how I deal with people, really easy because I always deal with them in a way that's consistent with my values and how I operate. Now, one of those values, you may have got a sense of it already, is I'm incredibly open, I'm incredibly straight-talking, right? And that means my situational leadership capability is sometimes lacking because I will always go for the open, straight-talking approach, right? And I've had to learn over time when you have to temper that for the good of the individual or for the outcome that you want.
What is an example of that? When is it not great to be
straight? Shall I tell you, one of my first bad experiences of that as a manager was someone in my team who I got on really well with, I really rated, I wanted to promote, and I really loved, and I felt I'd given everything to, who came one day and said they were resigning. And I basically said, you stupid arsehole, you're throwing everything away, and if you're going to resign, then I don't want to know about it. That is how I felt. Probably not the right thing to say because they resigned anyway. They resigned telling everyone that I was an arsehole, and I was, because that was a really stupid thing to say, difficult, wrong way to approach it. Yeah. And then didn't really want to have anything to do with me, when in fact they were a great talent I would have loved to have got back in touch with and kept up with. So, entire transparency and honesty of what's going on and how you feel, even though I did believe they were making a terrible decision to go from a reputable business to a non-entity business for the sake of a couple of grand, and I did think it was stupid, it probably wasn't the right way to approach it. And I do that now in later life. I make those mistakes all the time. I've been far too blunt with people who have said, I want to work at home 5 days a week. Now, I deeply believe in hybrid working, but that's hybrid. And the reason it's hybrid is because in our industry, time together as teams to gel, to know each other, to creatively spark, to learn from each other is really important. And I don't think 5 days a week at home is the way to succeed in our industry.
I actually don't think it's healthy for a human.
I don't think it's good. But me being blunt and telling them that doesn't always go down right.
Can't imagine what you're like after a couple of whiskeys.
Yeah, luckily, a few years ago, I stopped drinking. So you don't have to imagine that anymore.
Well, I did too. I stopped drinking 2 years ago. One of the reasons was the first night of Cannes in 2022. I got a bit drunk, and I run my mouth at the best of times, and I'm pretty honest and open too. But sadly, the time to thinking to mouth is compressed even more.
No, and I stopped drinking for mental wellness reasons. I've been quite open, including in the industry. I've written a few things.
Share them with me now because I don't know about them. Why?
So I'm a depressive. I have anxiety as well. Yeah. And I personally have not found that holds me back from doing my job. Yeah. But I have often found that there's a huge stigma around it. When you consider that something like 1 in 4 people suffer from some sort of mental health issue on an annual basis, that's a lot of us, right? It's more prevalent in professions. It's more prevalent in people who are more senior. It's more prevalent in high-stress, high-powered jobs. That's called our industry. And yet it's still a bit like, would you trust someone on your business if you knew that they were mentally ill? You know, and I just don't see that particular connection, right? This is a part of the human condition. So I spent about 10 years covering it up, not telling anyone about it, apart from my wife. Definitely not letting people know at work. I obviously covered it well, because when I came out and started talking publicly about it, people said, oh, I had no idea. But that 10 years was incredibly hard, because I was spending a lot of time covering up what I really felt and what I really was, and making excuses. So I gave up drinking for mental health reasons, and I used to say, oh, I'm driving tonight. Sometimes I wasn't driving. I didn't want to say, don't drink anymore because it's not good for my mental well-being. And then eventually plucked up the courage to say, do you know what? I'm just going to start being honest about this, because if someone who's reached a relatively senior point in the industry can't be honest about it, what hope is there for someone who's junior, who's looking and going, well, no senior people ever admit to this, and I'm only junior, so I can't. I'll probably lose my job if I say I have mental wellness concerns. So so I decided to come out and wrote a piece about it, wrote another piece about it, talked a bit about it on podcasts, talked a bit about it on the stage. Now I'm reasonably comfortable. In all honesty, the first 4 or 5 times I talked about it, like I just have now, I was absolutely in tears. Firstly with my boss, then with my team, then the first time I did it on a stage or whatever, absolutely, just because I'd never talked about it, I didn't want to talk about it. And now I can do all that without crying.
Well, Sil just interviewed me and I cried for the same reason. So it was, and I'm sort of probably not as far down the journey as you in some ways, but I definitely struggle with my mental health, and I'm sort of, quite open and honest around it. And that's awesome bravery, and it's also super selfless, but also you're now liberated, and you can feel and see that confidence, and rather than feel like you could get caught out. I know this is the wrong question to ask, because I should just be saying, oh, great, you came out and got all this great feedback, and then you liberated others and all that sort of shit. We get all that. I reckon that would be a 5-minute chat. Has there been any cost?
I don't think so. And part of the reason is I'll pull you up on saying it's selfless. I said to people, actually, it's a selfish act to make me feel better that I have then reconciled by making something that helps others at the same time. It is not a purely selfless thing. And that is why it works, right? Because I got a lot out of it about how confident I feel, how good I feel about myself, and then by helping others, how good I can feel about the fact that I did it, so I don't have to be embarrassed about it anymore. So, that all went together. It's pretty complex.
I talked about HeMan. I don't know did you ever grow up with HeMan?
Yeah. Well, okay. HeMan and Skeletor.
Yeah. So remember, I had to look up these names the other day because it's sort of unlocking a part of my brain. But, and Mattel's about to roll out these as action films like they did with Barbie. And, so Battle Cat and Cringer was the same animal. Cringer was this terrified cat. And then when, struck with confidence, became this battle cat. And I feel like that in my life. And I reckon you would at times as well.
We're all humans. We all go home and have disappointing days and have problems at home with the kids, or your parents getting old, or family issues, or disappointments. And we all suffer those all the time. And this sort of fake idea that just because someone's risen to the top in business and is relatively senior, that somehow they're not human anymore and those things that happen is absolute BS.
Yeah. But that's not what, there's all those disappointments, but for some people, for no apparent reason, when they go down, they just go down, like whether it's hereditary trauma or, generational, like there's all, we can't, no one really knows. You go, oh, it's because that happened to me when I was younger. for some reason you can be sitting there going, I'm finding life a bit tougher than the people around me. And I can't. And I'm trying to put a sticker on things. Maybe it's my job, maybe it's my relationship, maybe it's my, self-esteem. But sometimes it's just this friggin' fog.
Yeah, that's how it sometimes feels.
Yeah. Awesome, and thanks for sharing that with us. For your teams, and having done that, you obviously now have a language around that, which is like, all right, I'm a leader who is vulnerable at times. I'm like Cringer, not Battle Cat in HeMan. And because there's been, even not just for you and your personal journey, but COVID very much just allowed a lot of leaders to go, come on, mate, you're allowed to just be a bit fucked up.
Well, it's interesting you talk about a language around it, because I actually think the lack of language around difficulties that people face is one of the big barriers.
Oh, okay.
And I think that in a lot of ways. So I didn't know when I wanted to talk about it the right way, because I'm not one of those people who'd gone to lots of classes and self-help groups, and I thought, I could never do therapy. I've now done therapy.
Yeah, it's really
I
good.
could never see the doctor. I've now seen the doctor. Not if you're on the NHS in the UK. So,
oh, really? Yeah.
And actually, I didn't know how to say things, right?
Yeah.
So, and I found I said, what am I doing? I'm kind of coming out. Am I allowed to use that language? Because that's the LGBTQ community language. But that's how it felt to me. I'd been hiding this thing in the closet. And was I going to offend someone by calling it coming out? Because I didn't know what else to call it.
Yeah.
And then I also used to call it, I still do. I suffer from depression. A lot of people pulled me up and said, hey, that's not the language anymore.
Yeah.
If you have mental health concerns, you don't want to call it suffering because it's normal. I said, well, I'm sorry, but it's my problem and I can tell you I suffer. So I'm going to call it I suffer from depression. I'm going to acknowledge that other people don't, but I'm not going to pretend it's not bad. It's not a cool thing, right? I would rather not have it, right? But it is part of me. And I have the same... Again, this sounds really wanky, the language.
Yeah.
I was always kept saying, I'm a big diversity champion, right?
Yeah.
That sounds incredibly wanky. But there isn't a language. There's the language of I'm an ally.
Yeah.
That's not quite what I mean, because I am a diversity champion. I'm a shouting from the rooftops, being able to lead things in gender, in sexuality, in disability, in neurodiversity. I mean, I talk about those things all the time. I care about them, like all of us. I've experienced all of them in my family. I'm mixed race. I've experienced a lot of racism in my life as well. And I want to be able to talk about those things. And most of those things also have this strange lack of language. So you're treading on eggshells and you don't know what to say. And especially in business, but especially in our industry, which is pretty liberal in its views, you actually end up not talking about things that are important because you're frightened. You'll say something that isn't quite the right word, and someone will jump down your throat. And you're like, hang on, I'm trying to make progress and talk about it. So I do think the language thing is really important.
Here's a big question. I don't know if you've got nieces, nephews, kids. There'll be a time where they'll experience similar things, right? You said before, I wish I didn't have it. If you could wave the magic wand and get rid of it, would you? Knowing that it gives you the empathy.
It gives you insight.
The ability to march them through, because you need allies. Let's use that one.
Yeah, well, all of those things are double-edged, right? Growing up mixed race, I, have suffered racism since the day I went to school. Right? And still do as an adult. Right?
Really?
Just because of my name, even though I can, present as a Westerner, my name gives away that I'm an Arab, right? And I still suffer open racism from other adults in the street at times.
Wow.
And
that's a whole nother discussion we don't have time for. But
and people say, well, you could change your name and you would be able to pass as someone who was
Pete
white,
Smith,
and no one would do it anymore. And my answer to that is, for all the problems of racism that come with being mixed race, actually, I have insight that other people don't have. I automatically have two cultures on two sides of my family that I am intimately aware of and understand. And I could turn that into a very business-like proposal. As a marketer, that's very valuable, right? But that's not even what I mean. I just mean I have a rich life because I have these two separate things that some other people don't have. No, I wouldn't change that for the world. It's part of me.
Okay, let's final question is around your legacy. What would you like to leave behind? It can be personal, professional, all-encompassing.
Well, from a personal point of view, I say all that really matters in life is that people say he's a great dad. And actually all that really matters is that my 2 kids say he's a great dad, right? That's pretty much it. I like to be a good husband too. And that is about all that really matters. I don't think I'm going to lie on my deathbed and regret anything if I've been a great dad and a good husband. I think, no one lies there going, oh, I wish I'd made that different business decision. Yeah. So I try to not get over-exercised about business things. You do your best every day, you make the decisions right, and then you let it go and don't worry about the things you got wrong.
See, here's a question I have for myself, because I say that too, and, there's exercises where they go, all right, now that's what's most important. There's the pie chart. Kids, family, it's massive. Now let's do where you allocate your time.
Yeah, and it's all...
And it's terrifying. And you and I both doing 2 months of a tour around the world. And I know what the answer is, but it does conflict. And how do you...
Well, it doesn't. Like, we work to provide a good standard for our families and have a good life. Yeah. And we also work, I think, to bring the best out of ourselves. And I enjoy work. I always have. I can't really imagine not working. Yeah. So maybe that's a selfish act, but I want to be at work and I want to enjoy it. It does change how I approach it. Right? I wouldn't do a job I didn't enjoy for 2 minutes. I would be out the door and looking for something else to do. But I do get a lot out of it. So I'm prepared to give that time. And also I've got the excuse that my kids are grown up off at university, so they don't even care.
Yep. And well done. Zaid, that was awesome. What a great chat. Thank you so much.